Hey guys, welcome to Off-Grid Minis. Sorry it's a little late this week. I'm redoing the intro. First to tell you that I'm sorry that it's late. And also, I just didn't like how my first take of the intro went. I was just stuttering, couldn't gather my thoughts. So I just thought I could do better, and am trying to, at least. So, last week we painted up our corn bloodletter, the first one, at least, out of 10. And he turned out pretty awesome. The edging and highlighting came out just right. It looks awesome when you look at it in person, not so much when I take pictures, because my camera just saps out all detail. I am going to get a better one, don't worry. But this week I painted up another one of the Orruk Ardboys. So that's one of the Iron Jaws Weirdnob Warband. Was a bit of a fairly simple one again. Not too many small details. But unfortunately I did end up having to cut it into parts just because I've been so busy this week. And that's another reason this episode is coming out late, which I apologize for. So tools for this week, of course, I have my brushes. Main ones I use are the medium layer brush, small layer brush, medium base brush. Sorry, I was thinking of base but said the wrong thing. My starter brushes, I have two different sizes of them. They were just different years. So I mainly use the smaller one, but I do bring the slightly larger one out as well. And then there's just a couple other generic brushes I use for dry brushing and some of the basing as well. Then I also used my Deadland Tufts on the base. That's not in the video, that I did that after, once the Agrellan Earth, the cracking base texture, was dry. Then I have my makeshift palette. I used the top of this because I couldn't find the sheet that had the colors for these guys at the time. I used glue to attach the Deadland Tufts. And, of course, the mini. And lastly was the paints. I got Retributor armor. That's just for the hilt on his sword, or the guard. For the yellow areas, first I covered it in white scar just to make it a bit brighter, and then I used the Iyanden yellow contrast paint. And what that does is stains the white to a yellow, and also does the shading and highlighting all in one layer instead of using 3 different paints for it. I used Lead Belcher for the silver and darker areas, like the just his axe, I guess. Oh, and his chainmail. I used the Stegodon Scale Green for the blue areas on his armor, like his shoulder pads, one of the knee pads. I used it for the cross piece on the axe, just above the shaft and between the heads. Rhinox hide I used for the dark leather areas. Mornfang brown I used for the shaft of his axe. Rakarth flesh I used for his horns, and there's a couple horns hanging from his armor, as well as the skull as the pommel of his sword. And of course Wach flesh, that's used for the green areas, like the tops of his arms that are showing, the bottom of his neck, and the top of his neck as well. For shades, I had Seraphim Sepia and Null Noil. The Seraphim I used on the green areas and the bone areas, so the pommel of his sword, his horns, and the ones hanging off his armor. And then Null Oil I used on the dark blue areas of his armor and the silver areas of his axe. and chainmail. And then lastly, we have the dry paints. I used Thunderhawk blue on the edges of the blue areas just to give them that slight highlight, and Necron compound on the silver areas just to make them shine and bring out the more silver in the lead belcher. So that's it for this week. I'm sorry you didn't get to see him before I painted again. I just didn't like the first intro. Hopefully this one's better, but either way, what works, and I'll see you guys on the flip side. Let's get to painting. that concludes this week's episode of Off-Grid Minis. We've got a fairly decent little guy here. I'm getting better at the contrast. I think I'm going to, when I can, pick up a white base paint. It'll work a lot better than a layer for undercoating this yellow. And I also just have to learn the control of it. I'm getting the red splotches all over it. And also the other shades are leaking into it and just altering the color in some spots. But I'll get better at that with time. Other than that, it's a fairly decent mini. I'd be happy to use it in my armies. So, yeah, that's it for painting for this week. But we still got to find out what we're going to do next week. So, you know the drill, but in case you're just starting to watch now, I got 22 unpainted models now. Sorry. And I have a D6 and a D20. I'm going to roll both of them, and if the result is the same as any of the ones I've done prior, I do have them written down on a sheet here. But if the result is the same, then I'll just re-roll. And also, if I get 2 1s, then I'll re-roll the D6. And if it's a 1 to 3, then the result is 1. If it's a 4 to 6, then the result is 2. So that's how I figure those out. So let's roll and see what we get. I've done 12, 13, 21, and 25 so far. $16 and 3, so 19. Let's see if we can find this guy. It'll be 16 then. Sorry, there's quite a few to look through here. 19. Ooh, another Khorne bloodletter. Just another generic one, so it'll be another simple, short video for you guys. So, I hope you guys have enjoyed. I hope you guys have a great week. I'm sorry again for being late with this week's episode, and also for the cutting of the hyperlapse. That's just how it worked out, unfortunately. I will be working to get better at that in the future. So, have a great week, and as always, stay classy. Thanks for joining in.